Hey everyone, Token Dave over here, the dorky token black guy that's just trying to get by. And welcome to another edition of Token Topics. Here, I spend a great deal of time focusing on one particular subject matter, Keep in mind that the Token Topics are strictly my own personal opinions, alright? And these opinions are conclusions that I've come to based on things that I've seen, read, observed, and experienced as well too. So these are not matters of pure fact. These are basically the conclusions that I come to and my biased opinion. It's October right now, and when it comes to October, people predominantly think about two things: pumpkin spice and Halloween. All right? We'll focus on the Halloween aspect if you see what the title of the video is. But when it comes to Halloween, a frequent theme comes to mind, mostly horror. It could be horror in novels, movies, books, TV shows, comics. Most of the time, Halloween deals with some form or other of the evil that's in the world or evil spirits. And it's got me thinking, you know what? I should talk about the state of horror movies, in my opinion. So, there was a movie that came out a few weeks ago called The Babadook. And, I finally got around to watching it a couple of weeks ago. And that movie is awesome. I felt that movie was really done effectively well. However, I see a bit of a disconnect when it comes to speaking about that movie. You have the critics loving the movie, but the general audience really not impressed, And I'm not just talking about the stuffy elitist, academia critics or movie critics that are in newspapers, films like Siskel and Ebert and stuff like that. I'm also noticing that a lot of the basically looser and more flexible critics, mostly the internet critics, they're more on the side of praising the movie. And, a common theme that I've seen and a common complaint that I've heard is that, you don't see the monster, you don't see what's going on and everything, why couldn't we see it? And it's like, wow. This is not the first time I've heard something like that. A movie I still defend to this day, The Blair Witch Project. People get really upset when I talk about that movie because, of my close circle, I enjoyed the Blair Witch Project for what it was, and I really felt that, I do feel that it's a good representation of horror. However, people are like, oh, come on, this is BS, this is boring, you don't see the witch, you don't care about the characters and everything. Now, I can't understand people not really caring about the characters, I personally feel that the characters were interesting as a dynamic as they fell off each other, but individuals, not really that great. But what goes on in the movie, it's awesome. I personally was able to basically be put in their shoes and experience the fear that they were feeling. And that's the thing. Horror is supposed to actually invoke fear, not, and what I mean by invoking fear, I am not talking about fear of the physical or the visual and everything, it is pretty much more mental, psychological, and as well, also a way to reflect on sociological issues of the world, and as well as displaying the evil that occurs in the world, whether it be supernatural, extraterrestrial, or man-made, And I'm noticing that a lot of the movies that have been out for a few years and everything, and I'm not going to scapegoat this. I'm going to admit that the era of horror that I actually like, I loved horror between the 70s and the 80s, even this period fell into this trap. There was less a reliance on putting the audience in a fearful state and much more of a reliance on the visuals. We're talking about the blood and the gore of the aftermath of someone dying. Now, don't get me wrong. One important thing about horror is you're supposed to have some sort of consequence. You're supposed to have some sort of fear, and you're supposed to have some consequence. And consequence is mostly death and everything. And within that death, you do expect something like, horrific to be seen, But it tended to go overboard. And, it became more about a visual art rather than setting up the atmosphere and setting up, setting you in a mental place to be fearful or feel that terror. All you wanted was basically to see, who got killed in the most grotesque way. And that's why I feel like, horror is a term thrown around a little too loosely. Mostly what we're seeing right now is slasher and splatter movies. Now, when it comes to slashers, basically, it's just normally a normal guy or a normal girl going around killing everybody. An example is the I Know What You Did Last Summer, at least the first two movies, Sleepaway Camp, Halloween, and Friday the 13th. And I know, after part 6, Jason basically became a murder zombie and everything, but he started out as a average dude, and I'm still considering that a slasher movie. Splatter movies tend to have more of a supernatural element, or I'm going to stretch out a little bit more and consider them more of torture porn and everything. Both of these types of movies heavily rely on the visual, the most gross out, grotesque deaths, and the way that they, the body count goes and, all the blood splattering and everything. And that's the thing. That's a problem that I'm noticing. Most people are like, if you can't see a monster, or if you can't see someone, gruesomely dying, it's not really a horror movie. And that's bad because it's a misconception of the genre itself. Horror is supposed to put you in a state of fear. When you're afraid of something, it is not always what you see. It is not always what you physically feel. It's what is in your mind and what you perceive, mostly of the unknown. And there's a reason why people say the biggest fear one has is the fear of uncertainty or not knowing, because basically, it goes hand in hand. And a lot of the problems that are in Hollywood and the movies nowadays, horror has suffered the most from this because substantively, well, let's be honest, most movies don't have much substance anymore and everything. But horror itself, it became less about the substance, more about the gore, more about the gross out factor. And that kind of is sad to me. So if you watch my Stranger Things video when I said quote unquote horror, this is what I'm referring to. So in the future, you might notice me categorize a movie as a slasher movie or a splatter movie or a horror movie. You might hear me basically single out those three genres, basically. And yes, I know horror has is a grand genre, and there's tons of subgenres, and people consider slasher and splatter a subgenre. But the thing is, the way it is nowadays, you mostly have three. You have the actual authentic horror movie, but then you have, when I mean authentic horror movie, I'm talking about something like The Babadook that just came out. I'm talking about Don't Breathe. I am even also talking about Get Out, It, and there's other movie that came out recently. Oh, The Conjuring. Those are horror movies. Oh, as well, I'll consider The Purge, the first one, a horror movie. But then you have your Friday the 13th, your Nightmare on Elm Streets, your Saws, your Hostels, your Human Centipedes, which I categorize both as slasher and splatter. So, agree? Disagree? Drop me a comment below. give me a like, follow me on Facebook at Token Dave, or follow me on Twitter at TokenDave80. Subscribe and ring that bell so you know when a new video loads. But until then, this has been Token Dave, the dorky token black guy who's just trying to get by, and I'll catch you guys later.